Welcome to the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art.
All right, welcome to the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art. And hey, Todd, I saw that you were in the Pet Expo recently.
Yes. So, hey, guys. The Pet Expo was this past week. I think it was 4 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I was there with X-Dog. So Stan from X-Dog had contacted me a little while back.
X-Dog is the one who makes the weighted vest.
Yeah, X-Dog Heavy Vest. So xdog.com, pretty easy to check them out. And, you know, he was actually talking about some things that they had gone through as a company and now where they're at. And, you know, they started off as a fitness tool. And that's primarily, you know, what it was for. And it wasn't until they started talking to us that they realized that it has this whole behavior angle to it and what it can do. And one of the things I was trying to explain to them, because it would be hard to say how many booths were there, like in this expo, and essentially everything boiled down to the same thing. It was either food, like
leashes, probably.
Leashes, collars, something like that, beds, or hardware like crates, bowls, that type of thing. I mean, your basic kind of products. Good news is the food has gotten infinitely better. You know, it's gone from bits to just as boutique as you can imagine. There was some seriously good food, freeze-dried food, raw food, you know, kibble that's done the best. And that's positive. But in reality, I saw nothing for behavior. There was a tool, or not a tool, it was a balance board. Somebody had some fitness stuff like a balance board. But again, I don't even know if they were focusing so much on behavior, but the balance to it. And outside of that, nothing. I couldn't believe it. Nothing. Like Dogtro was there, but there was not. I walked through the new products. Nothing. Nothing. You know, I mean, I don't know what you use. I use the same probably 6 things, 7 things over and over again. So it would be a stretch for something new to come out. And that's what I was telling them about their vests. I go, you have one of these few tools that owners can immediately benefit from. Yeah. Immediately, like right away, if you do it the right way. And he was showing me they've changed some stuff on it.
That's the thing about Stan, by the way. He's always changing it, but like in a good way. Like he always gets feedback and makes the changes. But I remember when you sent me a video years ago, and you're like, "Oh my God, this vest is freaking amazing!" Like it's like, I can't remember the words you used, but you were blown away by the change that you saw in the dogs when you were trying to slow one of the dogs down. I looked them up. I was like, wow, they're local to me. They're just right down the street. So I sent him an email. Yeah. And so he met me at a coffee shop and we met, and he gave me a really cool guy. He gave me like all these vests. And, you know, I used to go hiking with some of the dogs with these weighted vests, especially for the more high energy, especially the ones that kind of want to run off a little bit. I'd keep them on a leash a little bit longer and weigh them down with the vest. And once they got like a nice, good pattern, which we're going to talk about today, then I would drop the leash. So
yeah, we're going to do some videos for them. Some videos of like, you know, before and after coming in the front door, like greeting people at the front door. Because there's certain things I think it has real power to. And then we'll also talk about this later, like when to remove it. Like at what part should you remove it? Otherwise you'll, you know, become dependent on it as a tool. But there was nothing there. I mean, honestly, he was carrying around the only tool that was really substantial in doing anything for really honestly changing behavior there. And they also have a weighted collar.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, I have one of those, so I'm interested to try that out. But you know, that's it. It's the same stuff. If I was like, showed up with a product, oh, I got these new leashes I'm going to bring in. I'd walk in and be like, what the fuck? You know, I mean, a bunch of stuff from China. You know, I just didn't see anything that made me go, wow. But yeah, some cool products, some nice things out there.
I mean, if I think about the last 12 years I've been doing this, there hasn't been, other than the X-Dog vest, there hasn't been anything that's revolutionary. You know, I mean, when I go to an appointment, I just usually walk in with the leash and that's it.
Just a standard slip lead, right?
Yep, that's all I walk in with.
That's, you know, I've used that for years. I think for the average owner, slip leads are difficult. Yeah,
always in my back pocket.
Yeah, I use Mendota. I'm a huge fan of those. I've been using them for years.
Should get you a hold of my leashes. These are nice. I'll bring some.
Leashes you guys make, like Ben makes really good leashes. Those
Oh, so good.
small leashes are
Yeah.
great. You know what I think is an underutilized tool, and they were there too, as a Herms Springer, using what are called the micro-prongs, the mini prongs for small dogs. Like, it's super underutilized, and it for the dogs, it doesn't put any pressure on the neck. We can go into that later when we start talking about tools, but that's they were there, the Herm Springer prong collar guys. But yeah,
They make a micro prong also.
I don't know if they're the ones that make the one that I get. I don't know. They're hard to find too.
Yeah,
but I am a big fan. We can talk about it later, but especially when it comes to using those micro prongs on small dogs, where the harnesses have been used, and overutilized and those type of things and put in play. But yeah,
I'm obviously not like opposed to prongs, because obviously I've used them before. I think in certain cases I've never really used a micro prong. I know that they're out there. Again, I'm not opposed to it. I just haven't found a use. But you have, so it's something we obviously can talk about.
Here's a question. So what tools do you stay away from? Like, what tool have you found? Like, you just said micro prong, but what tool have you never, or do you never implement?
Choke chain.
Yep, fucking hilarious. I was thinking the same thing. Like, I could never recall a choke chain. But when I first started training, so I started in 2000, I think 7, a lot of dogs had them. There were a lot of people still using choke chains, and they'd be real tight, so they could. But no, I don't use them either.
Hey, funny story, by the way. I just thought of this. So Ann and I, we were in Germany, and we were, prong collars are not allowed in Germany, but choke chains are, and which that makes no sense to me. But
Yeah, right.
that's where Herm Springer's from. They're from Germany, and my wife and I were at the cathedral in Cologne, which is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But we were there, and there's a lot of people that are walking, a lot of tourists. But I noticed that there was some dogs. You can always spot like the dog people, or like there's something going on. Like it's a group, you could just spot them, And they walk by us with all these dogs. And I told Anna, I was like, it looks like they're doing like a pack walk. That's what it looks like they're doing. And so I see this one lady who's handling this this really insecure Doberman, and she's cranking on this dog in Germany in front of all these people, right? And I feel super bad about the dog. And so I said, I was kind of walking there, and I was like, hey, and I never do this, by the way. I don't give any unsolicited advice, but I felt really bad for this dog. And I'm in another country. I don't even speak the language, right? And so then they're cranking on this dog. This dog is super insecure. It's reacting because of its insecurity of where it's at. And they're correcting the shit out of it. I mean, they were just like correcting it. And I was like, man, this is crazy. So I said, hey, by the way, do you mind if I'm a dog trainer from the US, and, I'd be happy to help out, And so it ended up being like a dog training school. And the lady who was handling it was the instructor, right? I didn't know.
How did she take that, by the way?
Like, how could you imagine? Like, she didn't like it. Like, that she's there teaching and I come in to step in. But I didn't know. I was just there to help, right? Sure. And so I said, hey.
It must have been bad enough for you to take that approach.
You know me. I'm very non-confrontational. But I was just like, hey, I'd love to help, And so I kind of just stepped in, and she had a choke chain on, right? And so the first thing that I do, what's the first thing when you grab a leash? What do you do?
Adjust it.
Me too. So that's what I did. And they made a comment. Of course, I didn't know because I don't speak German. I mean, then I didn't speak German. I speak more German now. But Anne is like, I could tell Anne is like getting really uncomfortable, and I don't know why, right? And so I'm there and I'm applying pressure to the dog, but I adjust the leash and I started applying pressure, not cranking on it, just applying that constant pressure to settle the dog and kind of move it, right? And all of a sudden Anne goes, hey, give the dog back. I'm like, why? She's like, just give the dog back. And I said, okay. And so gave the dog back, and I was like, what was that all about? She's like, well, the teacher, the instructor was very upset what you were doing. Of course, I was a lot softer than what she was doing. And she was upset that what I was doing. And so she was upset that I moved the collar up, right? I put it in a better position to give me a better leverage, and she didn't like that. And she knew right away. She was like, oh, that's what they do, those Caesar trainers and this and that. I'm like, you're freaking cranking on the dog. Like, And I'm just applying nice, smooth pressure.
Of negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement for that matter is always kind of entertaining, right? So I find it interesting that people that claim that certain aspects of training this way or that way are negative are negative. Like, so it's like everything's so open for interpretation. I've always find that type of shit entertaining, like that little nuance of interpretation of anything, but in our case, training. You know, that's good stuff, dude. But it's funny you say that because today I was fishing and a lady walks out on a dock with two dogs. She's got one on a leash and a German Shepherd runs out. And this German Shepherd is at me because I'm in a boat. And she thinks it's going to jump in. And actually, quite frankly, it looked going to. And it makes sense why this lady got so worked up because afterwards she told me she thought there was a huge alligator that was there.
Oh,
but
shit.
This lady starts screaming and screaming at the dog. And after about 30 seconds of it, I go, hey, knock it off. I go, you got it. The dog's nervous already. The dog starts going cowering down. I'll go, you got it. You're good. Chill out. You know, because it was the same thing. It's like I can watch and I can stay out of it up to a point. Yeah. And this particular dog, years ago, I was walking a pack and this dog charged out from the house and ran up and nipped the back end of one of the dogs. And that dog ended up running off. And then there was this little, scenario out in front of the house. And I go and get him. And I remember that. And I even said that. I go, oh, wait. Oh, that dog bit one of the dogs I've been with before. And the lady's like, no. So it's
That's
weird
funny.
to yell for somebody to yell at and torque a dog, or in your case, torque a dog in public, like with no shame. What do they do inside? What are they doing? What are they doing when it's like not there?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Who knows?
Yeah, right.
So I saw this post you made about your mother-in-law's dog, which is really interesting. Why don't you go talk about that real quick?
Yeah, it was good. So Jen told me, she's like, hey, Maggie ended up at my mom's house and the person that lives there are friends of ours. And she said, she called me and said she was as happy as could be. And the thing is, this is the.
Why don't you tell the whole story though?
Yeah, this is the story. So he is about 15. She was adopted in Arizona from my mother-in-law, I think in about 2015. Very shortly after she was diagnosed with cancer, and she moved here with Maggie. Now, Maggie had a bunch of homes prior to my mother-in-law. I mean, she's a little like Chihuahua Dachshund mix, I think, and fiery, but fits in perfect. Like she came in here perfectly. So when my mother-in-law moved to Florida, she initially moved to the beach and then ended up moving directly behind us. So like if you look at behind that, there's a house directly behind me and then one just off to the corner. They call it Catty Corner. And that would be my mother-in-law's house. So starting in about 2018, we started taking Maggie basically and keeping her. And she hung out with our pack and she hung out with the dogs here at the house because she was going through cancer treatments. And she eventually passed away, I think about 2020. So the part here that trying to say, we've had her since then. She lived with us in another house. We moved back here. All right. So we lived here. My mother-in-law lived behind us. She died. We had been living in another house. We moved back here. And the dog has never shown an interest. She's never gone and looked in the corner of the yard. She's never, there's never been anything in my mind, no pattern of interest in wanting to go back over there. It's been fully remodeled. There's new dogs that live there, new family that lives there. I couldn't conceive of anything that would trigger her. And then she walks over there. And to do it, it's like a long walk. She has to walk up this street, down kind of another street, and then walk back up this street. It's about a third of a mile. And she didn't live there long. And it's amazing to me. It's like, what was the purpose? And so the first thing, my reaction, my first instinct is she going to die? Mm-hmm. Like, is this something that she's doing? So like, and if there's a couple of comments that were amazing. There was a comment to the post and she says, when our dog of 17 years passed away, she spent the night running around the hallway, going from room to room, and then ended up laying down in front of what was my brother's room, and she died there. And the brother wasn't there, but she's like, the dog ran around saying goodbye to everybody in like this happy-go-lucky way, and then, laid down and passed away. And some of the comments were pretty astounding of what people were asking, what they thought it could be. Lynn mentioned dementia. She's old, but she doesn't have dementia. She's got a solid spirit. And my mother-in-law's ashes are actually like right above where she sleeps over here. Some people said maybe her mother-in-law was walking her. It was weird. Yeah. What do you think?
I had a dog that he was 16 years old, named Ty. Lived with my parents, and he lived on their farm that they had. And he had wandered off one day, and someone had found him. This dog never wandered off, never. He always stayed on the property. My parents, their gates are open, but he never left. Like, he just hung out there. It wasn't a fence. He just stayed there. And then they brought him back after he got lost or whatever. And then about 2 weeks later, he wandered off and they never found him. And so we just think that he just decided to pass away, like wandered off and passed away. So, they say that, sometimes dogs they say their goodbyes and they just kind of wander off. And so I never experienced losing a dog, like up until about 2016, which is fairly recent. And so, because when Ty passed away, when he wandered off, we never got to experience that loss. Like of death and dying.
Yeah.
But when in 2016, when I had my first dog pass away, that was really hard, But I don't know why they do it. I just think that there's something that triggers and it says, oh, like in their memory that says, oh, let me go back there.
Did you ever see the movie A Dog's Purpose?
Yes.
What'd you think of that?
It was a good movie. I mean, I think that
part of it to me that like the reincarnation part, maybe not, but for me,
right.
I mean, this is why I ask is I've always felt I've worked with dogs or seen dogs or been with dogs that wanted to be somewhere else. And that was the part of the movie that really I took away was like, yeah, I have been with dogs that literally don't want to be in this life.
Yeah.
It seems more than just like incompatibility. It seems like, nope, I'm supposed to be somewhere else. And that was what the movie meant to me. And that was what with this, because one of the things we used to always comment on with Maggie is that she seemed happier here with us because we had all the dogs and our other Chihuahua, Hercules, and her were really close and still are very close. And so there was a lot for her here. Now, my mother-in-law was one of the few people that could actually adopt this dog. So my mother-in-law was indifferent and could just handle a dog and not be emotional about it. And you know what I'm saying? It was not a big deal to have a dog. And I don't know. I'm curious as to what drew her back over there.
Well, here's the thing, right? Like, so she's kind of broken the pattern, which is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. There's a change in the pattern. Like she's used to a normal daily life. All of a sudden she decides to just wander off. And, so that is where you question, like, I wonder why, because she's used to a certain pattern. And I think that's something that that we work with dogs, we have to recognize the patterns.
So this is what we wanted to talk about today is, we mentioned the things at the beginning, but patterns. So as trainers, we're constantly asked about tools, techniques, what approach should I use? Tell me how. Most people that feel like they're a competent human being in life, and most of our clients that are, especially if you're successful, you feel competent. It's one thing to be competent, but to me, this thing with behavior, and I don't know if it was you or one of the other guys talking about, and it's Tony Robbins always brings it up, that there's three parts, right? You have to be able to recognize a pattern. You have to be able to change a pattern. You have to be able to create a pattern. And as dog trainers, I think what sets dog trainers apart are the ones who know how to recognize patterns the quickest, I guess you could say.
100%.
Would you agree with that?
100%. That's how actually, I have a whole thing called pattern stacking. What is pattern stacking? It's just like you said, and I've used that same Tony Robbins video because I know what you're talking about. He talks about, he talks about children. Children have also patterns, right? Certain situations, certain stimulus create a pattern. And so For me, when I go into a house, I am just there to observe what is a pattern. I say, well, show me. What does your dog react when someone comes over, right? So this is what they do. So I see everything leading up to the pattern. And the only thing that we're doing is creating a new pattern, changing. So you see the pattern, then you say, okay, what I want the pattern to look like, right? So with the example with the door, the person hears the doorbell ring. That creates running towards the door. And then we're like, stop, get back, down, sit, stay. And they open the door and the dogs are going crazy. So there's a lot of areas where the pattern could have been designed to what is it going to look like? What should the dog do? And how should this whole thing play out? But in order to do that, the dog has to understand the pattern. Lynn has a very good saying. He goes, the pattern you set is the pattern you get.
Yep. Len was very influential on this with me and the recognition of patterns. And that for some reason, innately, as somebody that was into behavior even before I was into dogs, and I think, I've always been a little anxious, and I think as a protective mechanism, you can pick up on patterns quicker. I saw something where the like the best people in like the CIA and certain things like that are anxious people. And what they do is they teach you to deal with the anxiety, but anxious people bring in more information. You pull in more information and because you're looking for more threat, right? You're looking for what's a matter. So I've always been able to see patterns. I've always really, really, really been able to recognize patterns. How do you help people or see them? So for example, you just use the door. And I think the door is a good one that we can stick with as far as like the whole pattern thing, because it's so many steps. And one of the things that's confusing for people trying to train their dog is that I consider obedience single action behavior. Like it's a single, like a sit, a down. It's like a single action behavior. So how does that play into a pattern? And that's
you can add it into it. And that's what I talk about. Like, so you design a pattern, you think of like, what does the whole pattern look like? And you work on, sometimes I work in the front part of the pattern, the middle of the pattern, or even the end of the pattern.
Right.
So it just depends whatever the dog gives me, and so we're going to talk about the door. So the dog has already knows how to run towards the door, right? Okay. So we're taking something that the dog already knows. That's their pattern. Well, let's add something to the pattern on the end of that. So for example, if they run towards the door, I'll put a leash on the dog's basic slip, and then I'll teach the dog from the door to a bed or whatever I want it to do, right? So if it runs to the door, I grab the leash, go to the bed and hang out. I'll do that exercise over and over and over. I'll repeat that pattern until it becomes ingrained in their minds that they know what to do, what the expectation is.
How do you know when that's happened? How can you tell? So when you're doing this, do you use the leash every time, or is there a period of time that you do it in the absence of the leash so that you're trying to interpret if the dog got it or not? So how do you build the learning so that it becomes part of the pattern, but so that, because I'm going to go backwards here in a minute. I want to hear what you have to say about it. I want to go backwards in one of the things that I encourage people to do so that they can see certain things, so they know how to remove certain things. Do you know what I'm saying? So,
yep. So I'm going to use another Lynn quote here because Lynn is so great. He goes, the best time to practice the needed skill is when that skill is not needed, right? Yep. So we can practice the pattern before the person actually shows up. But then you can also use technology to recreate the scenario to create the pattern that you want, right? So then you got to remember, the pattern you set is the pattern you get. So for me, in that front door situation, and going back to answer your question is, yes, I use the leash, but I eventually want to become independent or not rely so much on the leash. Yeah. So my saying is, I want to use the leash as little as possible, but as much as I need, right? So what that means is I want to use it just enough until I don't need it anymore. But what that means also is I start to layer on, create a pattern of me being involved in it, so that when I am guiding the dog off the door onto the bed, I'm using a physical pressure with the leash to guide it to the bed, right? And every time I do it, that leash should start to dissipate, slowly wean it off. But I involve my body as well, so that my cue, my body language says, I'm asking you to come over here. So I'm like, I'll start adding everything that I would do as if the leash was off. But I'm using the leash when I need it. If I don't need it, then I won't use it. But I'll kind of guide it to the bed, use my body, use my sound, by snapping my finger, go to the bed, hang out over there. And then as I start moving towards the door, now the dog has somewhat of a grasp or understanding of when I square up to them and walk towards them, that they need to move back towards the bed. That's the psychological portion of it, right? So I took a physical aspect of the leash, a psychological portion of my body not being physical, and then I go answer the door. But I add all those key elements of the pattern to create the one big thing that I'm trying to create.
How do you explain it to people that won't understand those words?
Well, here's the thing. Everything that I do is I'm always trying to connect, not only with the dogs, but with the people, right?
That's your gift, dude. You connect with the people better than anybody. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
But I find what they're into. And I find whatever it is that, I don't know, I look at what's on TV, I read what books they're reading, I find out they're a sports fan. I say, you ever watch football? They're like, yeah, I love football. Well, you know, what they do is they practice the whole, like during that week, for the NFL, they're going to practice the entire week. They're going to have their practice squad dress up like them. They're going to put crowd noise that sounds like the stadium. They're going to know what plays they're going to run in the last 2 minutes. If they're down by 3 points, what plays they're going to do. So everybody in the team knows what the expectation is. And it takes away the nervousness of, because they've already been there. They've already experienced it, right? So with a dog, because a dog has already experienced it, the best time to practice it, needed skills when that skill's not needed. The dog already has an understanding. So when you do that, you actually don't have to correct the dog because the dog has already been through the pattern, been through the motions, right? So you're connecting with the dog, right? And once you're able to connect, the dog says, oh, I've done this before. So it's not a surprise, right? I made a post the other day about, I'm not going to correct my son for a skill that he hasn't yet developed yet, right? So
knock that little fucker around, dude.
No, I'm not going to do that. But I'm also not going to say, like, have bribe them with food either, right? And this is why, because at the end of the day, my ultimate goal when I'm teaching people is that I want them to connect with their dog. So whether you have a leash or you have food or don't have food or don't have a leash, the dog already has an understanding and expectation of what is expected, right? So we are the most valuable part of our relationship, us, the human being, when it comes to relationship with our dog. Not the food, not the leash, not the treats, not any of that stuff. Those are just tools to help, but to wean them off. And so that's how I explain it to clients that I work with.
Well, you start, the reason I was asking certain things is because you were talking about teaching the dog the pattern. And I completely see it, understand it, agree. And another word I used to use in the transition part is like participation rate. Like you were talking about, as little pressure as possible. So like at the beginning, you're doing most of the participation, and then it should transition to where that pressure is very little. But getting humans to see it, right? So like, how do you get a human to see the front door pattern? And one of the things that I think is helpful, because everybody has a different interpretation of things. Everybody sees things different. But if you can get everybody to see the steps, right? So and both sides. So a car door, you hear car door sounds. So then you can write. And this is what I try to get my clients to do, is I try to get them actually sometimes to get out paper and say, all right, let's write this down. This is especially helpful for my like more type A, like your analytical clients. I do this because it's like they have to have a visual. That sports analogy was really good because I was working with a pro coach, and I use that. I'm like, so let me ask you this: how many times do you have to take the team through a play from design to execution before they get it? And they're like, 6, 8, 10 times. And I go, so the first time you're physically moving them around. I go, how about the second time? Third time they get it, right? Fourth time they get it. And so a coach understands the importance of repetitions and the removal of guidance to competence, right? So like you're removing some of the guidance along the way. So I'll have clients write down, step 1, door, car door. Step 2, dog starts barking. Step 3, I come over and start talking. Step 4, my dog runs around me and goes back to the door and starts barking. Step 5, I yell at my dog. Step 6, my dog, and like literally have them go through the entire thing. So what they can see, or, you can videotape yourself, you can see the actual pattern. And I go, guys, you execute that perfectly 100% every single time. It's fucking nails. I go, if you write this down and look at it, you do the same thing 100% of the time. And then I'm like, what part do you want different? So now they can, so it's easy now to go like, what step do we need to do different? And they can see that, oh shit, step 3, when I show up yelling, let's change that one. And then basically what I try to do is take them through it to see that with every repetition of going through it, you should be able to remove one of these steps to where you get down to where it's the most minimal amount of steps, right? There's like a car door, there's barking, then there's you stopping the barking, guiding the dog. I think we use the same strategy. You know, I always move the dogs back away. But I think getting owners to see patterns in anything is really tricky. I don't think the people see it. The dogs can't not see it. It's part of their wiring. Dogs pick up on patterns like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what you believe, but I think, especially if there's enough intensity, one thing can create a pattern, especially if it's intense. 3 things definitely creates a pattern. So if something repeats itself 3 times, it repeats itself indefinitely until you write it down or break it down in your mind. You see the steps and you realize how to then go, okay, we're changing that step and that step. And then we can go in and offer whatever strategies, the leash, the pressure, the bed, and so forth. But I think the biggest challenge for people is being able to see their pattern involved with their dog. That's why we can say your dog's a snitch. Your dog is always telling us, based on how they move, how they act, the way they pull on the leash, what you do, right? If your dog, I mean, what do you think? If you have a dog that like just cranks their head down to sniff something, you know you have an owner that equally cranks back 100% of the time. You don't even have to look at the situation. But getting the owner to see the pattern is to me the greatest challenge. And then, as they say, from there, what do? How do you change the pattern? And why we talk about prevention, preventing patterns or unwanted patterns anyways. So how do you get owners to see what they're doing?
I just got done working with a dog. That's why I was kind of running late, but I was working with the dog and I started to tell her, she's telling me and they always tell me the things that they don't want. Right. And one of the things that she has this puppy who's like 7 months old, Labradoodle, shocking. She's like, he always runs away from me. And then I heard Vladi in the back of my mind. Maybe she's a bitch.
That's perfect.
But anyways, and I'm like, okay, well, what do you want him to do? And she's like, oh, I just want him to come back. I was like, okay, well, you got to do a lot of groundwork with him first. But since you're asking, I go, he's inviting you to play, right? So he thinks it's a game. So you're joining in on this game by chasing him. I go, I will have none of that. I will, from the minute a dog, I will never chase a dog. If they start to like make a game, I stop what I'm doing. I get me a long line, sneak it on them, let him go play, do the exact same thing. I try to create it again. I try to create that scenario again where he may get me to chase him again. He goes in the backyard and I go outside, create the exact same thing, the same experience, but now I'm changing the rules on it. I'm changing what it looks like. Then he's like, you want to go play? And I'm like, I'm not going to go play, but I'm going to go that direction. So I have a 15-foot long line. I step on the leash. I grab the leash. I was like, let's go. Come on. Let's go inside. So I'm changing the rules. When he does this, I'm going to do this. I'm creating a pattern if you want to go play. But and this also goes back to like imprinting, right? The imprint of creating a pattern is saying, this is not how we do it here. Like, you're going to always come to me.
Let's go back to that. So this is the biggest difference between why when we go and work with your dog and we're trying to help you change your behavior, it's 2 totally different things, right? So we get to walk in and be firsts. I don't care how many times your dog has practiced being a dick. They've never done it with us. They've never done these things with us. So we're first. Why is it so much easier for us to be a first and an imprint than changing and reproducing a pattern that the owners have gone through? Just like the lady you're talking about, right? So you could get that Labradoodle today to run towards you probably way easier than the owner can, because you got to program it the way you wanted to from the beginning, the imprint, as you were saying. So how does that play into advice? Because people think that they can just suddenly add the advice we're giving them as opposed to changing what they've created, then adding what we're teaching them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, but and this is something that I've kind of always done, is I take the behavior that the humans are doing, even if they're bad behavior. I want to call them doing bad behavior because they want to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I look at even their patterns, but then I kind of say, you're doing okay, but this is how I would change it. So I try to take some of the bad things that they're doing and make it positive. For example, like I said about the dog, I don't make there's a lot of people who tell me like, I still want my dog to bark because, my wife, sometimes I travel and I want my dogs to bark.
Yep.
Okay, I can do that. And some people like squash it. I don't want no barking whatsoever, which I think is kind of weird.
I want my dogs to destroy the front door.
Me too, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like there's some people, like some trainers that'll be like, no barking whatsoever. And the dogs is like, don't move from place, I allow the dogs to be a dog to vocalize if they need to. Right. So people see that as the bad behavior, right? It's not a bad behavior. It's something that they naturally do, but it's the guidance after that moment. So they say, okay, you don't want that, but we have to put a limitation on the bark that says, hey, thank you for letting me know that someone's at the door now. I got it. So I need for you to go over here. So I'm taking their bad behavior and I'm making it a positive experience to say, I'm not making the dog wrong for it, but I'm saying, this is what you need for you to do after. I need to bring it down. I got it from here. You know what I mean?
Well, Caesar would call it limits, right? So when people go, can your dog bark? I go, well, yeah. How many times or how long? Right. So we can regulate that. And I say the same thing. I travel and I want my dogs to light the door on fire. And they do. And they will light the door on fire. But if you have a practice of stopping excitement, regardless of what's triggering it, in this case, it's somebody at the door, then you can control that. And I think that's the biggest difference of being able to allow it or not is if you can't control it, it's your dog's house to start. So you have other groundwork to do. And we go back to the connection, which you had mentioned, right? The connection is the foundation for what you can do. If you're not connected with your dog in a way that your dog is open-minded to taking your direction, none of that matters. Nothing we teach you is going to work in that situation because your dog is on a different agenda, right? And I think that's the part to remember, the connection part. And then being able to see the pattern in everything. So are you able to see that when your dog is barking and you come up to the door and say no, that your dog starts barking louder? Can you see that or hear that to know that you actually just, your dog was A, you were B, now your dog was C. You triggered C. That's the part of the pattern thing that I want people to see is take a step back and watch yourself. Watch the whole thing like we get to see it. Especially when people are yanking on a leash. No, no, no. And the dog's like, and it's not possible to see that you're contributing to the behavior that you're trying to stop. And that was what I was asking you earlier. Like, how do you get people to see that part of the connection, the A, B, C, D? And I remember Lynn was really emphatic about that. Lynn was really, really, really emphatic on breaking down that look. Fuck. You caused that, and it went and did that, and then that caused that, and being able to show the steps of the way this shakes down and the patterns shake down. Everything. I mean, the front door, everything. So
everything causes something, like either, again, it's forward movement, backwards movement, avoidant behavior, going back to what we talked about last week.
Right.
But, since we're talking about patterns, and I recently, it's kind of on topic, but also off topic. I got this book because I spent the weekend doing the Oregon Tails workshop with my dog Buddha. Phenomenal. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10. Blown away. Like I actually was in tears because I actually really connected with my dog on a really deep level. We can talk about that on another day. But
was it online or did you go in person?
No, in person. They came to Dallas.
Okay.
I mean, it's like you talk about so different yet the same. Me and Lynn, I talked to Lynn about it yesterday. It's like, Lynn always says everything's exactly the same but completely different. Like that's what it was. Like it's so different but exactly the same in a weird way. But anyways, I started to last week. I got into this trying to, because we're controlled. Like whether we wanted to believe it or not. Like as human beings, we're controlled by a device, by a phone, like social media, right? And so and these are all patterns, right? So we are taking part of a human study that's we're the product. We're not the consumer. We're the product. And these social media know more about us than we probably know about ourselves.
Oh, in a scary way, for sure. For sure.
I mean, if you think about like how everything is attached, here I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on real quick, but you have a bank account that has my information, right? And everything is going to a digital, a debit card, credit card that's attached to my name, my social security. So they know my age. They know that I'm Hispanic. They know that, I possibly have 2 kids. I drive a Toyota 4Runner. Like they have all this information. So they're able to create a profile pattern. They're able to see a pattern and they're able to see my buying patterns. Like this guy buys X amount from Amazon. And so this is like, we are involved in like patterns, right? And so I recently started to try to like take control of that, by really limiting my screen time, my social media, and be open to these things because I'm in a pattern. And the reason why I'm saying this is because the phone dings, we feel it, we immediately reach for our phone. We are conditioned to, when you need to go into, for me, it's avoidant behavior. Like I'm avoiding something. That's why I go to social media. And so I had to recognize that pattern in my life. That's why I'm bringing it up, is because I had to recognize what my patterns were so that I can design, create a whole new pattern with my life to take control of the things that I feel that are kind of, but I use the things that I do with the dogs in my own life, right? To first of all, acknowledge what is a pattern that I normally do? Why am I doing it? I'm trying to avoid something. And so now I go to social media to just go in, make my post and put it away. That's kind of been my thing.
Oh, I think people think they have, I've always seen or believed that people believe they have control of certain faculties that they don't, and they give up control of certain faculties that they have control over, right? So they don't see how patternized they are. They don't see how easily influenced they are. They don't see how so much of their emotions and their responses and their way, the family just came home, the way they see things is often other people's ideas. Like the majority of what's bouncing around in your head is not yours. It's just, as you said, it's been coming in from outside sources that have been able to see your patterns and then continue to feed that in different ways. I've always been like the anti-conformist. Since I can remember, I've always, if they said left, I went right. For the very reason that you're saying, is that I always felt like there was an agenda outside of what was being presented to me. A little conspiracy all the way back. And I mean, for the most part, I think it gives me a good perspective. I'm able to pull back a little bit and just not take what's given to me, and always able to kind of see a broader perspective of things. I think I'm pretty open-minded to it as well. And to your point, I don't know if people see how patternized everything is now. I mean, and that's literally all it is. I don't really follow a bunch of social media. I don't follow a lot of much of anything like that. I'm on it, obviously, doing social media things. Hi, baby. And so, yeah, but I don't think people realize how vulnerable they are to being programmed. I don't think people truly understand that your brain is so vulnerable to conditioning. And like you go to a grocery store, how primed you are. Like, if you ever look up priming, like psychological priming?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about that before. Remember,
that shit's interesting. Like, oh, this is going to make you do this, and this is going to make you do this, or make you feel this. So,
however, and we've talked about this, as you know, like I love.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the biggest patterns people don't realize is the pattern of not being able to stop your dog. Think about that, Art. Talk about that for a second. Think about it. So how many people do you know say no, down, stop, off, quit it, leave it in an attempt to stop their dog, and the dog immediately does the behavior right after? Because in the middle of a podcast, they don't take the time needed to settle the excitement. And that is the biggest pattern that gives us a job, is that people say no, but they don't actually go in and physically, to your point of when you go back to what you just said with the front door, they don't physically offer any guidance. They offer auditory guidance. No, there's no physical guidance. but the dog gives physical action, right? And so then the human then does what? No, says more. The dog does what? Physical. The human says no, and the dog does physical, right? And now you have a pattern. Now the human thinks the dog is being disobedient. The human never realizes that they're part of the pattern of what's happening. They see the dog is not doing it right, have no idea they're wired to it.
Yeah.
And so you get them to write it down or videotape themselves so they can see it. But that is the biggest pattern I think that gives us a job, is the pattern of inability, the pattern of being connected to failure over and over and over and over again, to the point when you say no, the dog goes, oh shit, let's get ready for this.
Yeah.
Let's get ready to ignore that.
I was going to add something to that. I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So that same client that I was working with today, I asked her, hey, don't ask your dog to just take the words out. And I go, right now, the only thing I really want you to do is learn to move with your dog. That's all I want you to do. Just move with your dog. And so I had a leash inside the house, and we were just walking inside her dining room, just walking around. And the dog's fighting the leash, finally fighting the leash. I did it first. I was like, you're going to take over. But I did this, right? And then what I did is I said, look, I'm not here to tell the dog, you talk about a one motion behavior, right? Sit down, sit, right? Because she wanted, when people to come over, that the dog was relaxed. So I said, okay, we're gonna create this. But I was like, I can't create it right now, but we're gonna get back to it. So I worked with the dog, moved with the dog, had the owner do it. We went on a short little walk. Oh my God, the walking's amazing. We came back, dog's exhausted. Come out the front door, take the leash off, dog just lays down. I said, all right, now where was I when I first came in and the dog was jumping? Where were you? She's like, I was in the kitchen. I go, good, take him to the kitchen right now. We're going to create this whole scenario all over again, right? We're going to create the whole pattern. We're going to imprint. So I went over there. She went to the kitchen. I went outside, waited about 2 minutes, rang the doorbell. She walked over there. The dog walked over there. Now it's not like jumping all over the place. And then I said, I keep the leash on the dog. The dog tries to move towards me. Just use the leash to move it back. That's all you want. That's all I want you to do. Don't say anything. Just move it back. If it happens to move forward. She opens the door. I walk in. How's it going? Dog lays down on its own. I said, this is exactly what I'm trying to create. I want the dog to come to its own conclusion. And I believe that the dogs learn better when they come to their own conclusion, when they can figure it out. It's not me micromanaging. I guided them to that point, but it's really the dog comes to their own conclusion. And so, you were talking about being manipulated and all this stuff. And not that I'm manipulating the dog, but I want the dog to think that it's his idea.
Well, dude, we talked about this last week. In animal world, animals aren't taught what to do. That's not the way teaching happens. Teaching's not taught by here's how you do it. It is taught by what you can't do. Now, parents will demonstrate certain things, like behavior modeling is a big part. So like they observe things. There's these birds that are born here. They're called sandhill cranes, and they raise these birds on the ground.
Ribeye in the sky.
What's that?
They're called ribeyes in the sky.
Okay, there you go.
Supposedly it tastes like ribeye.
Sandhill cranes?
Yeah.
Interesting. They're protected. And what you can see is like, at first, the mothers or the parents will grab little things out of the ground and give them to them. And then you'll see that they'll grab things out of the ground and then they have to come over and take them from them. And then you'll see they'll grab things out of the ground and leave them there. And then they got to come get them out of the ground. And then eventually the bird is able to copy what the parent did, right? So there's a behavior modeling process, which is as close to us using the leash and guiding a dog as you get. But when it comes to what not to do, like what can't the dog do, which is all our no, down, stop, off, quit it, leave it, they're never told what to do.
Yeah.
If they get it wrong, there is an ignoring or a correction that happens. They're never taught like, oh, do this, don't do this. We so overcomplicate it. I think if everybody stopped talking for a month, literally like completely stop talking for guidance with their dog, completely, their entire body becomes the conversation. You start to use every aspect of your movement and the way you move your body and the way you would engage the dog through your body, that it becomes so crystal clear that if you want to go back and add words, then you've already created new patterns. I think words are what fuck up the patterns. I think that's why people struggle so bad, is that our patterns with our dogs involve words.
Yeah.
The patterns need to involve complete physicality. And then as you see the dog understand it, by physicality, I mean using a leash, guiding, directing, moving them through it. And then with each repetition, picture a coach, and this is what I was talking about. It was an NBA coach. Like creating a play, draws it up, X's and O's. When the players are first on the court, he might grab them by the shoulders, move them over here a few steps, go to here. Now now he does, now you move over here. And he'll physically take you through or the positioning. But the second run, they'll stand a little further back. And you're more guided through it because you were taken through it. Third run, they're further back. And they're waiting to see if you understand how to go through it. Fifth run, sixth run, by these ending runs, you have this routine and rhythm going. That's the part I'm saying, is that humans need to just shut the fuck up and create that flow with the dog. A dog has to physically go through something to learn it. And the moment we talk, we do two things. We add a step to the pattern that's unnecessary for the dog. And we usually don't connect it properly to the pattern for it to be effective over time. And it ends up being connected to something not working, not something working. I mean, that's the gift. I think Liz Foley did that. She was able to get her clients to not talk for 2 weeks?
I don't know, but I know
or 2 weeks or something like that. And I was
that's what Lynn did with you guys too in your program.
10 days. I couldn't talk. And it was, I will never forget the way he introduced it. Dogs can't talk and they're fine. If there's something you need to say, you'll figure it out. And if there's something you want to say, you'll hold on to it long enough because it'll be important. Most of what you're thinking about is just kind of bullshit anyways. And you're just waiting to talk. And the moment that is removed from your brain, your ability to observe a situation is different in a way that is only understood if you do it. You know what I mean? And I mean, it's unbeatable to be with dogs and not talk.
We're joined by River Ortiz. You want to come join our podcast, River?
What's up, buddy?
No? He said no.
It's funny. Both our kids just came in at the same time.
Hey, the latest episode of the Huberman Lab podcast.
What's up, buddy?
This has so happened that he had my favorite magician, Aussie Wind, on the last episode. And I love listening to it because there's a lot of psychology that's involved in card magic, which, I love. And I really love like doing, card magic and things like that. And Andrew Huberman asked him, is there like a supernatural part of it? He's like, of course not. He's like, but what I do is like, I make people believe that what they see, like without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt. And he even talks about like those patterns that he sees in the audience, like what to look for and what person to not pick on, but choose. And so there's a lot of psychological stuff that happens in that. But he was like, I make people part of the illusion, which they don't even know that they're a part of the illusion. And so, like I said, I love card magic. I took a class with David Blaine, and maybe I can do a trick here. But Aussie Wynn was also one of the coaches that was on there. But he talks about how like he's able to not manipulate. He just makes people think that they see something that's actually not there. And it's not
perception, right? I mean, you're understanding that people have a pattern of how they're going to go through steps of how they see things or explain things or experience things. And if you can look at people and go, oh, the person holding themselves in that way has the pattern of going through life in this way, I can probably manipulate or steer this in the direction I need to.
And he can always, and that was one thing that Andrew Huber asked him. He's like, is there ever a point where you like the trick doesn't work? He was like, no, because I always have an out. Like he makes people his mistake part of the whole trick. He adds on to his and keeps going and leads them into something else. And so I thought it was so fascinating because again, he's looking at patterns, but he's like, that is like what I kind of, not that I want to do with dogs, but like when you're part of the trick, you're thinking it's your idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so with the dogs, you're kind of doing the same thing. You want the dogs to think like this is their idea.
I think that what you said earlier and what you're talking about right now is also a very underutilized part of the importance of dog training, a lot of people that we see are constantly, they interpret control or pack leader as or dominance or as do this, do this, do this. And it's not. Just to your point, it's you create limited options so that the dog picks an easy choice that you want them to pick. If the dog picks it, you don't have to keep reminding them. That's the biggest difference, is that once the dog makes the choice and the dog figures it out, they'll always revert back to that. And so you don't always have to give direction. That's the most, I think, annoying thing is watching people constantly, no, sit, hey, nope, nope. You know, like the constant training, the working hard, not working smart. And working smart is getting your dog to pick the choice you want them to pick, which is always going to be what happy-go-lucky or calm surrender. And then once they pick that, make that the benefit for them, right? So the pattern in their brain is that if I pick something and here, accepting, things work out. The pattern is that for me. To me, that's the trick. But people think they're constantly needing to tell their dog what to do. And that goes back to if you could stop talking, completely stop talking, put a leash on your dog. If there's something you're thinking about getting your dog to do, show them how to do it. But shut the fuck up and see if you can pull it off. It's like teaching a 2-year-old how to go in a canoe. Your words don't matter. You know what I mean? How you kind of physically guide them in here and sit them down and get them to sit still. Hold on. There we go. There you go. We're just going to put our bottoms right here. Nice job. You know, that energy exchange and that ability to physically create an understanding is underutilized.
Yeah.
And that creates good patterns.
Yep. This has been awesome, by the way. I love this. I'm in love with this episode. It's a good one.
Well, patterns are, I think, and we've talked about like seeing patterns and creating patterns, but then if you were to have a puppy, it's building a pattern, like building a pattern before anything bad happens. There's nothing harder than breaking bad habits to build new ones. That's the hardest part of our job, is teaching somebody that's been doing something that's already built a pattern how to change it. I did a post a long time ago and people didn't quite understand it. The post was go in your kitchen and move your silverware from one drawer to another. And tell me how hard that is. And if you want to make this easier, quicker, you need to have a reminder, meaning you need to have some type of something for presence, right? You need to be reminded that when you walk in the kitchen, it's different. And you need to walk in the kitchen and practice going into the new drawer as many times as you can so that you had repetitions underneath your belt. So it was about taking some, and the point is look, you think asking your dog to do something different is a piece of cake, but it's not. If I ask you to go find a spoon in a different drawer, it is going to screw your mind around for like 3 weeks. And if
this happened to me actually.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And if you want to improve it, then you need to walk in with a note. You need to walk in with a moment of awareness. You need to walk in with a presence, and you need to intentionally grab the new drawer, and then you need to walk out and you need to walk in and do it again. You know what I mean? And honor the fact that to change a pattern is not easy. I mean, it's not even easy by the remotest standards.
And you can also default to the original, because that happened. We moved our water dispensers, and for months I went back to where the new, would go, where the location was at, and out of nowhere, I went back to the old location. I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like this, and it like I was like, I had been so good, I knew where it was at for the past 3 or 4 months. All of a sudden, I go back to the old location. I was like, what just happened here?
Dude, do you want to know one of my greatest fears as a parent when McKenna was a little child? Was leaving her in the car. I live in Florida, and obviously it gets hot. And just to your point, like how could I end up going back to where the water is different, is the smallest thing in your morning pattern change, where you think you're dropping your kid off and suddenly you're at the gas station or the grocery store and you forget. That was like, I was terrified because why? Because to this conversation, it wasn't that I felt like in any way, shape, or form that I was negligent, but I understood how sensitive we are to a rattle in a pattern. Yeah. And it goes back to what I was saying, where people think they have control of things. You don't. Yeah. If you do something on a repetitive basis, you drive to work the same way every day, and then suddenly you're asked to go do something different, it's super easy to jump on the freeway and continue driving to work and forget to go do that other thing because it's not in your daily pattern.
Yep.
And I was terrified by that. Fortunately, it didn't happen.
Me too.
You know what I mean?
Yep. I think every parent has that fear. But all right, man, I got to roll. I got to get back to the family. So good talking to you. And thank you guys so much for listening. Todd and I, of course, we've been saying this every episode about getting a guest on here, but I think we have nailed down maybe our first guest. However, I don't know if you knew, but he had a baby. His wife just had a baby recently. So we'll see. All awesome. Right. Thanks, Todd. We'll talk to you guys soon. And thank you guys so much for listening to the Dog Psychology Podcast with Todd and Art.
All right, guys.